Go ahead.
Okay, so you're going to introduce, do you want me to introduce the waffle?
No.
People, I guess, have seen it before. I'll mention it. This is a nice waffle. What are the ingredients? Oats and eggs and
This one's rye flour.
rye flour. Yeah, it's been tasty the last little while, but they're all tasty. I like the oat ones, maybe. You're asking, I think I like the oats. You were asking if I like some better than others. The oats have a nice texture too. And then, of course, this has a huge whack of strawberries on the top, and on the sides some golden berries. The golden berries this time aren't that good, but what the hey, they're certainly better than nothing. Now over here, you'll see some golden berry poles.
You won't, because I don't have them in the shot.
Okay. Anyway,
But they're
I'm not sure what's
humongous.
in the shot.
They're taking up half of.
Yeah,
this
it's
part
amazing
of
they're
my
not in the
head.
shot. They've kind of bent over and
Yeah.
leaning towards
They
the
fell
sun.
over and now they're growing up that way.
Sure,
Because they were up to the
Yeah,
eaves troughs there.
very
And then they
impressive.
just went.
yeah.
And then they're growing this way.
Yeah, they're
So-
going towards the sun and stuff like that. So, anyway, the other day I was reviewing, maybe not yesterday, but the day before, a tourist guide for Rome. This thing is
Just get down.
a tourist guide put out. That one almost surely was put out by. No, it wasn't. I thought it might have been put out by the Italian government. This one I think might be put out by. It's put out by Palfit Limited, printed in Israel. So it's again not by the Israeli government, but I wasn't able to find when it was put out. But
Enough. Go.
it looks as though it's been around this world for a little while.
Have your own waffle. Go eat your own waffle.
Done by a guy called Bob Baseman, and it sounds as though it's got an English name. This is in English and French. So it's he does a good job. Whoever translated it, whether he did it himself. The French seems okay. The English is done quite well, and this is one of the problems with some tourist guides you get from some places. The language breaks down when they're trying to do English and they're not native English speakers. They should just try to hire someone who's English to do, or someone who knows both languages to do the translation. Sometimes it's quite funny. I wouldn't call it hilarious. Yeah, I feel like kind of like lending my services and doing the translate, like kind of smoothing up the translation for second edition, but I don't think there's usually second editions. So this thing is about Masada. Masada, I think it's Masada is how it's pronounced. It's a place that the Israelis kind of have a special memory for. It's where some refugees from Jerusalem, people who've been ethnically cleansed out of Jerusalem, about 70 AD, the Jews back then, wasn't Israeli, rebelled against the Romans starting 66 BC. And within 4 years, they were getting ethnically cleansed, particularly out of Jerusalem. And some of them, they were called zealots. One of the zealots, I think the zealots are basically nationalists. One of the zealots a little bit earlier was one of Jesus' disciples. What was his name? Simon, maybe? Simon the Zealot. So that wasn't Simon Peter. Anyway, I could be glitching about that, so you want to look that up if you're the least bit interested. Anyway, 72 BC, they said the Romans sent the 10th Legion after them, and they built up this huge ramp. Masada's incredible. It's like this isolated rock tower. It's got cliffs pretty well on every side. The Romans had to build a ramp to it, and they did. They were
You're not going to get
the
anything.
greatest engineers, I suspect, up to their point in time. They did aqueducts, and they'd done, let me see, around 70. Well, the Pantheon was redone in the time of Hadrian, a little bit after that. I don't know if it had the dome. I think maybe the dome was added around the time of Hadrian. So it's a little bit after, but that's the first dome in world history. And the amazing thing is, despite some horrible earthquakes, I think the worst were around maybe the 8th and 7th, 8th, 9th century, somewhere around there. The Pantheon is still standing, the world's first dome, and it's still standing after 1900 or so years. That's very impressive. So building this ramp was just a matter of bringing enough earth in, and Lord only knows what would have happened to these poor folks up top there, these poor Jews. They decided to commit suicide instead of being left to the tender mercies of the Romans. They might have had to fight animals in Colosseum. Did the Colosseum exist then? I believe it did. And or some other place. I think originally before the Colosseum, they had prisoners of war and stuff like that would have to fight in the Forum. I think that would be the Roman Forum. There were several fora that were built after it and stuff like that. So the Colosseum was amazing. They say it held 50,000 perhaps, and that might actually be a relatively accurate estimate. So yeah, these poor Jews committed suicide. The sad thing is, I'm afraid that Jews have been forced by the rest of the world to get their own large Masada, which they call Israel. Its borders really aren't defensible. It really isn't the land that's theirs that we know, looking at the Assyrian annals. Theirs by right, and theirs by their monuments, monuments and other archaeological remains. There's tons of places that would be sacred to some Jews or precious for the secular Jews, and they don't have, according to the United Nations, it's the ununited Nazis or United Nazis. There's enough, a plurality of the nations are Nazis. Many of them are Nazi commies. Others are phalangist type of Nazis, where they're religious, horrible brutes. The phalangists style themselves as crusaders, if I'm not mistaken. The phalangists, yeah, I believe those are the ones in Spain. I believe they styled themselves as crusaders, along with them being nationalists. They were nasty brutes. And there are lots of people who are basically, like Nazis, are fascists. And
I really need to cut my hair.
They are, yeah, I'll cut you.
It's terrible.
They are the equivalent of crusaders and stuff like that. Holy warriors, shall we say. Now, it's kind of, they've made this a bit of a tourist thing, but it's, they were showing how they were having a bar mitzvah up on the top of Masada and stuff like that. So I think what they say is Masada, never again. Somewhere along the line, I'm going, wow, like your little nation, which is maybe the size of New Jersey, the size of a state, not a country. It's got indefensible borders, and it's got some indefensibly obnoxious neighbors, and to different degrees obnoxious, and stuff like that. You Christians who've been collaborating with the Muslims amongst the so-called Palestinians, you are going to get your comeuppance. Like if the Muslims have their way, the fundamentalists, you will be dhimmis again and paying taxes and all this sort of stuff, and you'll be saying, oh, for the days when when we were employed by the Israelis, we didn't have to pay onerous taxes and stuff. And that'll be the ones of you that survive. Yeah? You're being very, very, very silly. Ganging up with Muslim fundamentalists in particular. You haven't been that friendly. You guys have basically support the PLO. You guys are absolutely useless. PLO, Palestine Liberation. There's no liberation involved in the project of Yasser Arafat. You guys they don't believe in democracy. Don't be fooled by them. You actually, the Christians in the Middle East, Lebanon, and elsewhere, benefited from the colonial era because the colonialists actually allowed you to trade and stuff like that, and you didn't have to pay the taxes. Kind of fell in abeyance, the special taxes for dhimmis. People are so-called protected, but they're protected the way the mafia protects businesses and stuff like that. It's gimme, 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 and I'll protect you. So that's what was happening to the Christians.
Protect you from my wrath.
Yeah, from me. So, or from us. Yeah. So it's funny how they call it protection. Like that. The stupid left-wingers go along with it, the faux gauches and stuff like that. I've got to specify, I'm not talking about all left-wingers. I'm a left-winger. Like a left-winger believes in democracy and believes in speech and believes in freedom, individual freedom. Faux gauchers don't believe in any of those. And we'll move on to that in a second. At any rate, Masada, it's probably long out of print and stuff like that. If you can get hold of it, it's actually quite well done. It's made for Canada because it's English and French, although I think Canada should be trilingual. It should be in every place in Canada except Newfoundland. There should be because I don't think there are any Beothuk or Beothuk left. The story is there might be history that they just were wiped out. And it's Newfoundland, not Labrador. Every place in Canada, there should be 3 languages taught: English, French, and at least one local language. Here it should be, in Lethbridge, it should be Blackfoot. At least one of the dialects of Blackfoot. In Calgary, it should be, you've got your choice, like Tsuut'ina, or Sarsi as it used to be called, or Blackfoot, or Cree, or Assiniboine, or Stony, whatever the going word is for that. Here, they should teach it at the University of Lethbridge. They should teach Kootenai, which is over at BC. They've got a few small reserves there. We actually drove to one, I believe, on the way to Radium Hot Springs or Banff or Fairmont Hot Springs. We're actually going to that park there, Kootenai Park. I think we drove one of their reserves, maybe a couple. Not big enough. So, it's 2/3 made for Canada. So there'd be places where it'd be interesting in BC, but the universities should teach all of the native languages. They should be available. There should be a degree program for every native language. I'm not necessarily talking about dialects, but for Cree and the 4 different dialects of Cree. There should be one for Blackfoot, not necessarily for all the dialects. There should be Tsuut'ina or Sarsi for the beaver, or whatever the buzzword is now. The Dene Sulene, what did they used to be called? Chipewyan. And just on and on it goes. I don't know what they call dog rib anymore, but it just goes on. Slavey, I don't know what they call Slavey anymore. Those are Dene languages. And then the Ojibwe, Chippewa, I think it used to be called. And maybe Montagnais, Abenaki, however that's pronounced. It's Abenaki that's in eastern Quebec. Algonquin, Abenaki, I think, is down in the United States. Mi'kmaq, however they mispronounce it. I just mispronounce it in a different way. The old-fashioned way.
Yeah, I find it interesting that they've now changed daycare to early childhood learning or something like that. Like it's now being represented as school. School for your kid to go eat cookies.
That's euphemism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
but daycare is actually a bit of a misnomer too. Is day carelessness?
yeah. Well,
They didn't have enough people
for the children.
watching
yeah.
over.
And
Okay.
I mean, a child needs stability. They need to know that there's family that they can count on. There's somebody there for them all the time.
So daycare isn't necessary. They're not ideal.
Yeah, it's not ideal at all because it teaches kids that their family's not there for them all the time, but society will, they can count on some strangers to care for them all the time or whatever. And so they grow up and they count on strangers to care for them all the time. So,
I'm afraid a lot of faux gauches are going around. They don't actually look at the data. They're not interested in data. When you mention data, they get all ironic. So what's the data on that? Here's a little news for you faux gauches out there. When you get all emotional on stuff that isn't founded on data, you end up making all sorts of mistakes. You end up looking as though you have no moral compass. So,
but yeah,
as anyone knows, sorry, go ahead.
No, I firmly believe that people should be learning. I don't know. I'm like my mother's family's French. I don't know French.
Uh-huh.
I've tried a few times, and James has talked about people learning languages and how they'll start and then they'll give it up. Yeah, that's me.
No, it isn't.
I'm terrible.
You're slow, but you keep on going.
Well, yeah, it is.
And you improve. You improve
right.
very slowly.
I am surprised by when we started again how I very quickly get to where I was, and then get a little bit further. And then I get frustrated, and then I stop.
No, it could be I'm a lousy teacher.
No.
But
I don't believe that.
Pretty well anything I've taught, I've been pretty good at.
Yeah. It gets to a point where I'm like, oh, this is so hopeless. I'm taking forever, and it's what am I going to do with this? Whatever. And I shouldn't get down about it, but I do. Mm-hmm. And I should just stick with it, like I did with the poetry. You taught me that, and that worked out really well.
Pauline was a very, very good learner there. She's a pretty good learner with the French. The main problem is her sticking with it. I know that she'd make huge advances if she just did some every day, but she kind of burns out on it.
Yeah. But
for a while, but she goes back to it.
Native languages, I think it's essential. I mean, it'll just it wasn't that long ago, maybe 6 months ago or something, we were hearing a woman talking about the residential schools and this and that, and the various abuses by whatever government, and she was saying we don't want. She was saying something like, we don't want reparations. We want to know that it won't happen again. You know, she was actually a pretty sensible woman. It doesn't help to just keep, oh, here, you know, have some more money to make up for whatever. I mean, there's some things I want to write the government about and say, that's it, you know. How many millions of dollars are you going to fork over to us because, wow,
All
you
the
have
horrible
abused
stuff
us
they've
so
done
badly.
to Pauline and to me.
But it doesn't really help in the grand scheme of things. We're going to die, and then they're on to abuse somebody else in the same way. So it really doesn't help.
The important thing is to have it exposed.
Yeah.
The residence schools have been exposed, and the important thing is to keep people recognizing that you're responsible in your accusations. When you go around saying it's a genocide, that is not just false or fake. It is
Yeah, and when people do
boneheadedly
that,
false.
it's actually they're working against the cause.
Absolutely. So
Because then people realize, wait a minute, this isn't genocide at all. What are we paying for? You know, and they get all mad the other way, right?
So what they do is they turn off on the whole message.
Exactly.
You got to be responsible to yourself as well as to everyone else.
Yeah.
When you start throwing accusations around, when a genocide happens, the population goes down. Generally, significantly.
But why don't Canadians, why aren't they taught the native languages of the people that they're on the land, the people that are buried under it? Mm-hmm. You should know their language, right? I mean, it just makes sense that if people were actually taught this, like a little bit about their culture, maybe a lot about their language, so that they could look into the culture,
mm-hmm.
Be interested to look into it further themselves, whatever. And then maybe they'd have a little bit more respect. Or
if nothing else, how tough the language is.
Yeah.
And one thing learning French, but the vocabulary, if you've got at least a middle-falutin or even maybe a high-falutin vocabulary, you're going to know almost all the vocabulary in French.
So I'm
but
really
it's not
for
that way with the native languages.
Early childhood learning, but that should be done by the parents. And I remember when I was a teenager, and there were people that had babies already, and I remember there was this one native woman from northern Saskatchewan, and she was friends with me, and she was very nice to me. And so if she ever watches, she'll know that I liked her. So she had a baby, and she was saying, I don't understand why the government doesn't pay a parent to stay at home with their baby, rather than taking their babies away from them and putting them in foster care. Because, and I didn't really understand what she was saying at first, and I didn't entirely agree with that. I was like, well, if a person's abusive to their child, you don't want them to be paid to stay with their baby, but so there's that, right? But it's like, no, a lot of the time, I've talked to other people, like James was talking about this family member that he had, that the mother had left, and
a relative, shall we say? Not immediate.
No, but the father was left at home to care for this baby on his own, but he had to go to work, and so he
didn't have a lot of money.
No, and so he ended up going to work, I don't know if he left the baby with a bottle or what.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's not great. But I mean, he has to be able to feed the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so he has to have money to feed the baby. So I don't know what he was thinking exactly. But the baby was taken away. And then the baby was severely abused
Well, what
by the
happened
people
is
in
this
the
is
foster care
Alberta
system.
government.
So
They went to this woman who deserted the child with the husband and asked, is there anyone on the husband's side? Well, on your side of the family, are you willing to take care of him? No. Is anyone in your family side willing to take care of him? No. This is the amazing question.
So
is there
anyway,
anyone on the husband's side
why weren't they asking
willing
the
to
husband
take care?
or his family?
And she said no.
But they didn't.
Wow.
So, and I've talked to so many people since then that have stories like this, where it's the child was taken away because of neglect, because the parents having to try to work to feed the child, and honestly, I've talked to children that were taken away and been in the foster care system, and they're like, they didn't believe they should ever be taken away, and they should have been left with their parents. And I mean, in the case of James's family, well, that
was awful.
I don't know how the government can make up. There's got to be some serious reparations with that, because if you're the government responsible for taking the child away, and then you find people to care for that child who severely abuse that child, there's
the worst abuse was when this fellow was in the care of the government. So we're talking about gang anal rape.
They were
anal rape.
The child was neglected by his father,
but not
trying
abused.
to work, but not abused. So had the government actually given the father the income to stay at home and care for the baby never would have been abused. And
well, he'd been abused by the mom.
Yeah, pinching. But that's not the level that he got abused within the system.
No. I mean, she was awful. Can you imagine?
Yeah, but not as awful as within the system.
No.
But yeah, I can see how the government, they'd be like, oh, if we give this incentive, then maybe the baby's mother, who was a pincher, would have stayed home to stay with the child. And that you don't want that, right? But, I mean, gosh. Anyway, I can see what the woman from northern Saskatchewan that I was friends with, that I can see what she was thinking. Unless a child is like neglect, okay, how can you work around that? Is neglect because the person is having to work? Would they want to be around their child? Like, anyway. So, early child learning should be done by the parents when possible. And I believe in later child learning. I think the age of where you reach adulthood is 18, and what is that figure? In other places, it's when you're sexually mature. Well, that's not.
In some other places.
That's not.
That's not
you're
right.
not an adult when you're but obviously, when your brain has finished, your prefrontal cortex has finished forming.
And when is that?
25.
25.
And sometimes it's a little later.